My name is Anthony, 35 years old, a tech millionaire with a net worth of roughly $300 million. At first glance, you might think my life is nothing but roses. And yes, that's true. But you know, even roses have thorns. And the story I'm about to tell you is about those thorns, the ones that have etched themselves deep into my memory even to this day. When I was 9, my parents suddenly brought me to a tiny remote town in Oregon, dropping me off in front of my grandfather's old wooden house. I stood frozen on the porch, clutching the worn suitcase my mother had shoved into my hands that morning. The biting cold of the countryside seeped through every layer of my clothes, carrying with it the scent of dry grass and red earth from the distant fields. My parents rang the doorbell a few times, then turned and left as swiftly as if they were just passing through. Their truck rumbled down the dusty road, never once looking back. Their final words were brief. "We need time to settle our work." I believed them, but a small voice inside me whispered, "They're not coming back, are they?" A moment later, the creaky door swung open. My grandfather, Henry, stood there, tall and imposing, his rough yet warm hands pulling me into a tight embrace. "Come inside, kid," he said, his voice low and hoarse, yet strangely comforting. I quietly dragged my suitcase across the threshold, my heart heavy. The small house was steeped in the smell of time, laced with the bitter aroma of coffee and the faint scent of burning wood from the fireplace. He showed me to a small attic room where a thick woolen blanket draped an old bed and a window opened to a vast, desolate field. That night I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, trying to conjure my parents' faces in the darkness. They'll come back, won't they? But all that answered me was the howling wind slipping through the window's cracks, cold and unfamiliar. In the days that followed, I lived like a shadow. I spoke little, smiled even less, and answered my grandfather with curt, clipped words. But he never pushed me. Every morning he rose early, the clatter of the coffee maker echoing in the kitchen before he hurried out to the stables. Meanwhile, I sat silently at the old kitchen table, nibbling on the slightly burnt toast he'd made my heart hollow. I missed home, the clamor of city traffic, and even the heated arguments between my parents. At least back then I had them. Here it was just me, my grandfather, and the eerie silence of the countryside. One afternoon I saw him in the backyard tinkering with an old harvesting machine. Sweat beaded on his forehead, his hands smeared with grease, yet his eyes lit up when he noticed me. "Come here, Anthony, try holding this wrench." I hesitated before stepping closer, my small hands trembling as they grasped the heavy tool. He patiently showed me how to tighten a bolt, his steady, low voice reassuring, "You can do it, just give it a try." I fumbled through it, clumsy and slow, but eventually the bolt twisted into place. He let out a hearty laugh, the sound echoing across the yard. "Well done, you've got a knack for this." For the first time in what felt like forever, my heart felt a little lighter. But when night fell, the fear crept back. In my dreams, I saw my parents standing at the end of a dusty road looking back at me. I screamed, running toward them, but in a fleeting moment they vanished like thin smoke. I jolted awake, sweat soaking through my shirt. In the darkness, I wondered, who am I really? A child abandoned? A burden to my grandfather? I wanted to ask him, to know if he truly wanted me here, but I couldn't. I was afraid of the answer. Afraid that even he was merely tolerating my presence. Time passed, and I gradually grew accustomed to the rhythm of life on the farm. My grandfather never mentioned my parents, but he always found ways to pull me out of my dark thoughts. Each day he gave me small tasks, feeding the horses, collecting eggs, or helping him fix the fence. "Work makes you stronger, Anthony," he said, his eyes stern yet warm. I didn't fully understand, but I did it because I wanted him to be proud of me. One day, he took me to the old shed behind the house. Inside, it was filled with machinery, tools, and dusty circuit boards. "This is where I used to create," he said, pointing to a corner of the workbench covered with wires and LED lights. He told me about his younger days when he was an engineer, building things others thought impossible. "You could do it too if you want." I looked at him, skeptical. I was just a 9-year-old kid. What did I know about engineering? But he didn't give up. He started teaching me simple things. How to connect wires, how to use a soldering iron, how to read circuit diagrams. I was clumsy, messing up countless times, but he never got angry. If you make a mistake, you fix it, Anthony. No one's great from the start. His words were like a cool breeze, easing some of the pain inside me. I began to enjoy those afternoons in the shed where it was just me, him, and the smell of molten solder. One evening, he told me about my parents. Not much, just a few sentences. They have their own paths, Anthony, but you're not them, you're you. I wanted to ask why they abandoned me, but I didn't dare. I was afraid the truth would shatter me. Instead, I nodded, clutching the flashlight he handed me, helping him complete a small circuit. When the LED lit up, I smiled, for the first time in months. He patted my shoulder. See, you can do it. When I was 12, he enrolled me in a robotics club at the local high school. I was the youngest, dwarfed by older students. I was terrified of making a fool of myself, but he said, "Just try, Anthony. You're not less than anyone else." I brought home a pile of components and spent hours in the shed, assembling and programming. He sat nearby, never interfering, only nodding when I asked for his opinion. "You're doing great," he said, and I felt myself grow a little taller. At 14, I entered a statewide robotics competition. My robot, a tiny machine that could automatically pick up trash, was the culmination of my and my grandfather's efforts. The night before the competition, I couldn't sleep, trembling with anxiety. He sat with me at the kitchen table, making hot cocoa. "You've done your best. The result doesn't matter. What matters is you didn't give up." I looked at him, the man with silver hair and a kind smile, and I knew I couldn't let him down. On the day of the competition, I stood in the crowd, my heart pounding. When my robot passed every challenge and was announced as the champion, I could hardly believe it. I ran outside and called him. "I won!" I shouted into the phone. He laughed loudly, his voice hoarse with emotion. "I knew you could do it." That evening, he threw a small party at the farm. Just a few neighbors, a homemade cake, and music from an old radio. I sat on a wooden bench watching everyone laugh and talk, my heart filled with an unfamiliar warmth. I realized that even without my parents, I had a family, my grandfather, the farm, and the people who believed in me. But deep inside, I still wondered, why didn't my parents want me? That question lingered like an unhealed wound, waiting for the day I'd be brave enough to face it. In the years following my victory at the robotics competition, I felt a surge of newfound strength. I was no longer the shy boy who sat quietly in the corner of the classroom. At school, I became the Robot Kid, a nickname my friends gave me, half teasing, half admiring. I didn't mind. Every day after school, I raced back to the farm, diving into the shed where my grandfather and I worked on new projects. He taught me more complex programming, how to optimize designs, and how to face failure. "Every mistake is a lesson, Anthony," he said, holding a wrench, his eyes twinkling like a child's. I nodded, though sometimes I wanted to smash everything when a circuit burned out. At 16, I began to realize my grandfather wasn't just an ordinary farmer. The late-night phone calls he took, the short trips to the city he called business, and the way he deflected when I asked for details. All of it piqued my curiosity. Once I glimpsed a letter on the kitchen table addressed from a major tech company in Portland. I asked him about it, but he just smiled. "Just some old business, don't worry." I didn't press further, but I knew he was hiding something. Those days were a mix of joy and unease. I loved life on the farm, the mornings riding horses with him across the fields, the smell of wood smoke from the fireplace. But the question of my parents remained a thorn in my heart. I tried not to think about them, but every time I saw a family in town, parents driving their kids to school, laughing together, my chest felt hollow. I wondered where they were, what they were doing, and why they'd never called or written. My grandfather seemed to sense that pain. He never forced me to talk, but he always kept me busy. as if he knew work was the best medicine. At 17, I took on a bigger project, building a robotic arm to assist people with disabilities. It was his idea. "Make something that helps, Anthony," he said one afternoon as we sat on the porch watching a fiery sunset. "Your talent is meant to change lives." I spent nearly a year on the project, skipping hangouts with friends. He supported me every step of the way, from finding research materials to connecting with an engineer in Portland for advice. When the robotic arm was complete, it wasn't just a machine, it was proof of what we'd built together. That project took me to a national science fair in Seattle. For the first time, I left Oregon standing among hundreds of competitors from across the country, feeling smaller than ever. But as I presented, watching the robotic arm move smoothly, I saw my grandfather's proud gaze from the stands. I won second place. Not first like before, but he still hugged me tightly, whispering, "You made me so proud." On the drive home, I fell asleep in the car, my head resting on his shoulder, feeling safer than ever. Then came my 18th birthday. It was a dreary, rainy day, gray and cold. I woke up early hearing him clattering in the kitchen. The smell of freshly baked cookies wafted through the air, mingling with the sound of an old song on the radio. I smiled, knowing he was planning a surprise, as he did every year. But that day felt different. He called me downstairs, his voice more serious than usual. "Anthony, sit with me." I sat across from him at the kitchen table, a plate of cookies and a small wooden box before me. He slid the box toward me, his eyes deep and piercing. "Open it." I hesitated, my heart racing for no clear reason. Inside was a simple yet finely crafted silver ring, the inner band engraved with the word "Legacy." I looked at him, confused. "What is it?" He took a deep breath, as if preparing to say something momentous. "This ring was mine, and now it's yours. It's not just a gift, it's a reminder. Live with purpose and leave a legacy to be proud of." His voice was low but powerful, sending a shiver through me. I slipped the ring onto my finger, feeling its weight not just on my hand but in my heart. I wanted to ask more, but he changed the subject, urging me to eat the cookies before they cooled. Breakfast passed with laughter and familiar stories, but I couldn't stop looking at the ring. It felt like it held a secret, a promise I didn't yet understand. That evening, as we sat by the fireplace, I mustered all my courage. "Grandpa," I said, my voice trembling, "why did my parents abandon me? Why did they leave me with you?" The question, buried in my heart for 9 years, burst out like a dam breaking. I feared he'd dodge it, but he looked straight at me, his eyes sad yet resolute. "Anthony," he began, "your parents, they weren't bad people, but they were blinded by greed." He spoke slowly, as if tearing open old wounds. "When I was young, my parents tried to seize his wealth by forging documents while he was abroad on business. They thought he wouldn't notice, but he did. He confronted them, declaring he'd leave his entire fortune to charity, not a cent to his children. Furious and defeated, my parents left. And they left me behind, thinking only of themselves. I sat there, stunned. I thought I'd cry, but I didn't. Instead, I felt a smoldering anger mixed with pain. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" I asked, my voice choking. "Because I wanted you to grow up with hope, not resentment," he replied. "But now you're old enough to know the truth, and you're old enough to decide." He placed a hand on my shoulder, his voice firm. "My wealth, all of it, is yours now. Not because I want it, but because you've earned it." I stared at him, incredulous. Wealth? I'd never thought about money. To me, he was just a simple farmer living in an old wooden house, but he shook his head when I tried to ask more. "Don't worry about it now, just live well, Anthony, that's what I want." That night I lay in bed, staring at the ring glinting under the lamplight. It wasn't just a gift, it was a declaration that I belonged here, with him, with the farm, with myself. But deep inside I sensed a storm brewing. The truth about my parents, the wealth, the ring, all were pieces of a puzzle I wasn't yet ready to assemble. Then autumn arrived, painting the Oregon sky in vibrant gold. The ripe barley fields stretched endlessly, shimmering under the sunlight. My grandfather and I kept our old routine, riding horses in the early mornings, tinkering with new projects in the shed in the afternoons. But I began to notice him slowing down. He'd pause mid-task while fixing machinery, hands on his hips, breathing heavily. "Getting old, Anthony," he'd chuckle when I asked, worried. "Just let me rest a bit." I nodded, but unease gnawed at me. He was the only person I had, and the thought of losing him made it hard to breathe. One morning I woke up late, struck by the unusual silence, no clattering from him in the kitchen. I rushed downstairs, calling out, "Grandpa!" Silence. My heart pounded as I opened his bedroom door. He lay on the bed, eyes closed, face pale. I rushed to him, shaking him, my voice breaking. "Grandpa, Grandpa, wake up!" But he didn't stir. I touched his hand, it was cold. I stood there, frozen, as if the world had collapsed. I don't remember how I called 911, only that when the ambulance arrived, they confirmed what I couldn't accept. My grandfather had passed away from a stroke in the night. The hours that followed blurred like a nightmare. I sat in the living room, clutching the silver ring he'd given me, listening to people come and go. Neighbors visited, each with a story about him. How he'd fixed their tractors for free or lent them money in hard times. I listened, but couldn't speak. My mind was empty, repeating one question. "Why, Grandpa? Why did you leave me?" The funeral was held at the town's small church where he'd taken me every Sunday. The pews were packed. Farmers, engineers, even a few suited strangers from the city I'd never met. I stood by the casket, looking at his face, serene as if asleep. I wanted to scream, to pull him up, but I just stood there, gripping the ring, feeling it was the only thing keeping me from breaking apart. As the pastor read the prayers, I recalled our evenings by the fireplace when he'd talk about engineering, patience, and living with purpose. "You are my legacy," he'd said. Now he was gone, and I didn't know how to go on. All I knew was that no matter how much it hurt, I had to be strong for him. That day at the funeral, as I stood in the churchyard thanking mourners, a sleek black car pulled up. The door opened and I saw them, my parents. They stepped out dressed impeccably, but their eyes chilled me. My mother approached, hugging me, whispering, "Anthony, I'm so sorry, I've missed you." My father stood behind, nodding, his face stern. I stood rigid, not returning the embrace. It felt like an invisible wall stood between us. I wanted to believe them, to think they'd returned out of regret. But when they pulled me to a secluded corner, my mother's tone shifted, syrupy and artificial. "Anthony, you're grown now. We should be together as a family. Your parents will take care of you and everything he left behind." The phrase, "everything he left behind," sent a shiver through me. I looked at my father. He avoided my gaze, but I saw the tension in his face. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice cold. My mother smiled, placing a hand on my shoulder. "You know, your grandfather was wealthy. The farm, the company shares, everything. We need to talk to arrange things." My heart pounded as I pushed her hand away. He hadn't been gone a day and they were already here like vultures circling prey. "I don't have anything to talk about or arrange with you," I said, turning away. But she grabbed my arm, pulling me back, her voice sharpening. "Don't be foolish, Anthony. You need your parents. You can't manage that money alone." I yanked my arm free, staring them down. 9 years. You disappeared for 9 years, not a letter, not a call. Now what do you want? Grandpa's money? My father finally spoke, his voice low but menacing. "Watch your tone, Anthony. We're still your parents." I let out a dry laugh, feeling a fire ignite in my chest. "Parents, you abandoned me when I was 9. Don't act like nothing happened. And don't think I'm just some clueless kid." I walked away without looking back, but my heart was in turmoil. They stayed in town, renting a room at a nearby inn. In the days that followed, they called, texted, even showed up at the farm. Each time I saw them, I remembered his words. They were blinded by greed. I knew they hadn't come back for me. They wanted his wealth, something I hadn't even begun to consider. But I was also scared. I was just an 18-year-old kid. How could I stand up to them? A week after the funeral, I was summoned to a lawyer's office in Portland. Ms. Laura Bennett, my grandfather's attorney, greeted me in a glass-walled room overlooking the Willamette River. She was about 50, her hair neatly tied back, her eyes sharp yet kind. "Anthony," she said, handing me a glass of water, "are you ready?" I nodded, though my heart pounded. My parents were there too, sitting across from me, their faces composed but exchanging glances as if anticipating something. Ms. Bennett opened a folder and began reading the will. Her voice was steady, but each sentence hit me like a hammer. My grandfather had left me everything. The farm, shares in a tech company worth tens of millions, and other investments. Over $100 million in total. I sat there, stunned, unable to believe it. I'd never imagined he was that wealthy. To me, he was just a farmer in a flannel shirt, driving an old truck and brewing coffee every morning. My mother let out a small laugh as if she couldn't contain herself. "That's wonderful, Anthony. We'll help you manage it." But Ms. Bennett raised a hand, cutting her off. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Wilson, but the will is clear. Anthony is legally independent and he is the sole heir. There are no provisions regarding guardianship by either of you." My father slammed the table, his voice roaring. "What is this nonsense? We're his parents." Ms. Bennett remained calm, retrieving a small scanner from a wooden box. To verify the heir's identity, Mr. Henry requested a scan of the ring. I extended my trembling hand, the silver ring glinting. She scanned it and a code appeared on the screen. "A perfect match," she said. "This ring is the key, Anthony." Mr. Henry encoded it to ensure only you received the inheritance. My mother's face paled and my father shouted, "What? A ring?" The old man was insane. But Ms. Bennett didn't flinch. She produced another document, her voice icy. "Furthermore, you relinquished guardianship of Anthony 10 years ago when you signed this. The law does not recognize any claims from either of you." The room felt like it had frozen over. I looked at my parents, seeing anger and panic in their eyes. My mother tried to say something, but she only stammered. My father stood, pointing at me. "You'll regret this, Anthony. You don't know what you're doing." I didn't respond, just gripped the ring, feeling its weight. It wasn't just a gift, it was a shield my grandfather had left to protect me from the very people who'd abandoned me. As they stormed out, Ms. Bennett placed a hand on my shoulder. "Are you okay, Anthony?" I nodded, but my heart was a tangled mess. I'd just been handed a fortune, but all I wanted was my grandfather back. I looked out the window, watching my parents' figures fade into the rain. They wouldn't stop, I knew. But I also knew, thanks to him, I had the strength to face them. The rain still fell in a gray drizzle over Portland as I left the lawyer's office. The silver ring on my finger felt heavy, as if carrying the entire world my grandfather had left behind. I drove his old truck back to the farm, my mind a whirlwind. $100 million. The number echoed in my head, not as joy but as pressure. I'd never thought about money. To me, he was just the man who taught me to fix machines, ride horses, and live decently. Now I stood before a fortune my parents would do anything to seize. They didn't take long to act. 2 days later, while I was checking the fence in the western field, a black car parked at the farm's gate. My father stepped out, dressed in a suit, though his shoes were caked with mud from the dirt path. My mother followed, impeccably dressed, her smile forced. I stopped, wiping sweat from my brow, my stomach knotting. "Anthony," she called, her voice overly sweet. "We need to talk." I crossed my arms, staring at them. "Talk about what?" I made myself clear at the lawyer's office. My father stepped closer, his eyes sharp as knives. "Don't be foolish, Anthony. You don't know how to manage that money. You need us. Otherwise, you'll lose everything." I let out a dry laugh, anger surging. "Lose everything? Like how you abandoned me 10 years ago?" My mother cut in, her voice trembling as if on the verge of tears. "We were wrong, Anthony, but we're family. You can't turn your back on your parents." I looked into her eyes, seeing the dishonesty as clear as day. "Family? Family doesn't abandon their child for money. You came back for Grandpa's fortune, not for me. The air was taut as a bowstring. My father clenched his fists, his voice dropping to a threatening growl. Watch yourself, Anthony. We could go to the press. Tell them you stole your grandfather's wealth and pushed your parents out. Do you want this whole town to turn against you? I froze, my heart pounding. The thought of their lies spreading everywhere chilled me. But then I remembered Grandpa, the ring, and what he taught me. Don't let anyone make you doubt yourself. I took a deep breath, stepping closer to my father, meeting his gaze. Want to tell stories? Fine. Tell them how you forged documents to steal from Grandpa. Tell them how you abandoned me at 9, not a single call in 10 years. Go ahead, try it. I'll tell the truth. I pointed to the road. Now get out of here before I call the police. My mother paled and my father stepped back as if stunned that I'd stand up to him. They got in the car, but before closing the door, my father turned, his voice icy. This isn't over, Anthony. Their car sped off, leaving me standing in the field, my heart still racing. I gripped the ring, feeling the word legacy etched into my skin. I knew they wouldn't stop, but this time, I wasn't afraid. The following week, I was called to the headquarters of my grandfather's tech company in Portland. A sleek glass building, a stark contrast to his humble farm. Ms. Laura Bennett, his lawyer, accompanied me. You need to show up, Anthony, she said. The shareholders want to meet the heir. I wore the only new shirt I had, feeling out of place among men in suits and women in high heels. But as I entered the boardroom, I saw curious, even skeptical eyes from those seated around the table. Ms. Bennett introduced me, her voice firm. This is Anthony Wilson, the sole heir to Mr. Henry Wilson's shares. An older man, introducing himself as the CEO, spoke up. No offense, young Anthony, but you're young. What are your plans for this company? I took a deep breath, recalling the nights Grandpa taught me about engineering and responsibility. I won't promise to do everything perfectly, I said. But I learned from my grandfather I'll keep this company true to his vision, innovation, and helping people. The meeting dragged on, and I sensed a shift in their eyes, from doubt to curiosity, then gradual acceptance. But as I left the boardroom, an employee rushed after me, whispering, Mr. Anthony, someone's waiting for you in the lobby. They say they're your parents. My heart sank. I knew they wouldn't give up easily. I stepped into the lobby and saw my parents standing there beside a stranger in a gray suit. My father approached, his voice calm but calculating. Anthony, this is Mr. Carter, our lawyer. We found a way to prove your grandfather's will is invalid. Unless you share the fortune, we'll take this to court. The man, Mr. Carter, handed me a stack of documents, his eyes cold. You should consider this, Mr. Wilson. A lawsuit could drag on for years and you'll lose a lot. I looked at them, feeling cornered. But then I remembered Grandpa, how he taught me to fix a broken circuit. One step at a time, Anthony, don't panic. I met Mr. Carter's gaze. If you think the will is invalid, take it to court. But I have the ring, Grandpa's signature, and the truth. These two, I pointed at my parents, abandoned me long ago. They have no rights here. My mother shouted, Anthony, how dare you? But I didn't stop. I turned to my father, my voice calm but sharp. You want to fight me? Fine. But if you go public, I'll tell everything about the forged documents, about abandoning me. The world will know who you are. I stepped forward, pointing to the door. Get out and don't come back. They stood there, stunned. Mr. Carter muttered something, but my father raised a hand to silence him. They left without another word. As the glass door closed, I exhaled, feeling like I'd just weathered a storm. Ms. Bennett, who'd been standing behind me, patted my shoulder. You did well, Anthony. Henry would be proud. That night, back at the farm, I couldn't sleep. I sat at the kitchen table, opening the old wooden box my grandfather had left behind. Inside was his journal, its yellowed pages chronicling his life, from the days he built his company to the years he raised me. I read, each line pulling me back to our time together, but the final page left me choked with emotion. He wrote, Anthony, you are my hope. If you're reading this, use what I've left you to help others. Build Henry's Hope, a foundation for orphaned children like you so they can learn engineering, science, and find light in the darkness. I sat there, tears falling silently. He hadn't just left me money. He'd left me a mission. The next morning, I called Ms. Bennett, telling her about my idea to establish Henry's Hope. She smiled over the phone. I was waiting for you to say this. Henry was certain you'd do this for him. I got to work immediately. I reached out to advisors, met with people who'd worked with my grandfather, and planned the foundation. I wanted it to be more than scholarships, a place where orphaned children felt loved and believed in, just as he'd made me feel. I hired a small team, using part of the fortune to build the foundation's office right on the farm. Every day I worked late, reviewing applications from children in need, feeling as if he were still beside me, guiding me. Not everyone supported me. Some company shareholders doubted me, saying I was too young to run both the foundation and the company. They urged me to sell my shares, to let adults take over. I refused. I remembered his words. You are you, Anthony. Don't let anyone tell you you're not enough. I met with them, presenting the foundation's plans and pledging to keep the company true to his vision. Slowly they came around, though not all of them. One afternoon I stood in the field behind the farm, watching the first children supported by the foundation play. They laughed, holding simple robot models I'd taught them to build. I gripped the ring, feeling the word legacy as a reminder. I wasn't just carrying on his legacy, I was building my own. And today I sit here to tell you my story. A millionaire with scars on his heart, but a heart that still burns warm and alive. Henry's Hope has been running for over 15 years. From an idea in his journal, it's become a flame lighting the way for thousands of orphaned children. We've built schools, awarded scholarships, and opened engineering classes where kids can dream big. I still remember the face of the first girl to receive a scholarship, her eyes shining as she assembled her first robot. Now she's the chief engineer at our company, one of many young talents born from Henry's Hope. They haven't just overcome adversity, they're changing the world, one circuit, one innovation at a time. My grandfather's tech company, now under my leadership, keeps his promise. Innovation for the greater good. Young engineers, many once orphans like me, sit in boardrooms pitching ideas that leave me in awe. Every time I look at them, I see traces of him. His kind smile, his trusting eyes. I still drive his old truck, still live simply at the farm, though I could buy anything. But to me, wealth isn't money. It's the children finding their light, the legacy he and I built together. I run my fingers over the silver ring, the word legacy still sharp after all these years. It reminds me that no matter how painful the past, I chose to rise, to love, to carry on. And in the not-so-distant future, I'll pass this ring to my son when he's ready. Thank you for listening, and may you live a life full of energy.